Imagine a country on the brink of economic collapse. Hyperinflation is so bad that money is worthless. Shelves are empty. Hospitals are out of medicine. Families are fleeing the country just to survive. That's the situation Venezuela found itself in just a few years ago. And in a desperate attempt to save the economy, the government turned to a radical idea, cryptocurrency. But not just any cryptocurrency. They wanted to create the world's first state-backed digital currency, backed by one of the country's only remaining assets, oil. They called it the Petro. It was supposed to be a lifeline for a failing economy, a way to bypass US sanctions, a digital miracle that would restore financial stability. But instead, it became a global cautionary tale, a story of overpromises, technical failures, and a government that thought it could rewrite the rules of the global financial system and got burned. This is the story of the Petro, the crypto that never had a chance. To understand why Venezuela even considered launching a state-backed cryptocurrency, you first have to understand just how bad things had gotten. Because the story of the Petro isn't just about tech, it's about politics, power, and a country on the brink of collapse. For decades, Venezuela was one of the richest countries in Latin America. It had the largest proven oil reserves in the world. It was a major OPEC power, a key player in global energy markets, and a country with a high standard of living. But all that started to unravel in the early 2000s. Years of economic mismanagement, rampant corruption, and political instability had driven the country to the edge of financial ruin. Inflation soared. Food and medicine ran out. Millions fled the country. By 2018, the Venezuelan bolivar was essentially worthless. People were literally weighing stacks of cash to pay for groceries, and the government was desperate. That's when President Nicolas Maduro announced a bold new plan: create a cryptocurrency, not just any cryptocurrency, but a state-backed digital coin that would be pegged to the country's oil reserves. He called it the Petro, and he promised it would be a lifeline for the Venezuelan economy, a way to bypass US sanctions, restore faith in the financial system, and bring in desperately needed foreign investment. It was supposed to be a digital escape hatch from a collapsing economy, an economic Hail Mary. Maduro's pitch was simple. The Petro would be backed by real assets, 5 billion barrels of crude oil from Venezuela's Orinoco Belt. It would be a stable, trustworthy, national cryptocurrency that people could use to buy goods, pay taxes, and trade internationally without the restrictions of US sanctions. It would be the digital oil of the 21st century. Or at least, that's what Maduro promised. But as we'll see, the reality of the Petro was a lot more complicated and a lot less stable than the marketing suggested. Because building a digital currency is hard. Building one that's tied to a failing economy is even harder. And building one that nobody trusts, that's almost impossible. So how was the Petro supposed to work? According to the official white paper, it wasn't just a digital coin. It was a bold attempt to reinvent the Venezuelan economy from the ground up. And if it had worked, it might have changed the way the world thinks about money, oil, and sovereignty. But as you'll see, the reality was a lot more complicated. First, the backing. The Petro was supposed to be backed by 5 billion barrels of crude oil from Venezuela's Orinoco Belt, one of the largest oil reserves in the world. The idea was simple. 1 Petro equals 1 barrel of oil. This was meant to give the Petro a stable value, unlike the hyperinflated bolivar. In theory, this should have made the Petro a safe and reliable digital asset, protected from the wild price swings that plague most cryptocurrencies. It was a crypto stablecoin before that term even became mainstream. Second, the blockchain. The Petro was originally supposed to run on Ethereum using the ERC20 token standard. That would have made it a transparent, open-source cryptocurrency with a decentralized ledger and a smart contract backbone. But at the last minute, the Venezuelan government switched to the NEM blockchain, a less popular, more centralized platform. Critics speculated that this move was about control, not tech. NEM offered more privacy, more centralized control, and less scrutiny from the outside world. In other words, it gave the government more power over the currency, but at the cost of transparency. Third, the use cases. The Petro was supposed to be more than just a digital asset. According to the white paper, it would be integrated into the Venezuelan economy as a medium of exchange, a store of value, and even a way to pay taxes. You'd be able to use Petros to buy goods, pay for government services, and settle international trade. It would be a digital, oil-backed currency that could bypass US sanctions, attract foreign investment, and stabilize the Venezuelan economy. It was a big promise, maybe too big. And then there was the ICO, the initial coin offering. In early 2018, Maduro's government announced that it had pre-sold over $700 million worth of Petros in the first 24 hours. If true, that would have made it one of the biggest ICOs in history. But as we'll see, those numbers were impossible to verify. And many experts believe they were wildly exaggerated. In fact, as you'll soon find out, the Petro was built on a shaky foundation of questionable promises, technical shortcuts, and political desperation. And when you add it all up, it's not hard to see why it was doomed from the start. So, why did the Petro fail? Why, despite all the big promises and hype, did it never become the digital lifeline Venezuela needed? It turns out there are a lot of reasons. First, the technical problems. As we mentioned earlier, the Petro was originally supposed to be built on Ethereum, one of the most trusted and widely used blockchains in the world. But at the last minute, the Venezuelan government switched to NEM, a less popular, more centralized blockchain. This decision raised a lot of eyebrows. NEM is a private blockchain, which means it's not as transparent or decentralized as Ethereum. It gave the government more control over the currency, but it also made the Petro look shady and untrustworthy to the global crypto community. If you're building a state-backed cryptocurrency, the last thing you want is for people to distrust it from the start. Second, the transparency problem. The entire value of the Petro was supposedly backed by 5 billion barrels of crude oil from the Orinoco Belt. But when journalists and analysts started digging into those numbers, they found some big red flags. For one thing, there were no independent audits to confirm that the oil was actually there. There were no clear contracts tying the oil reserves to the Petro itself, and really no one could verify whether those reserves were even accessible. In other words, the Petro's backing looked more like a marketing stunt than a real asset. Third, the sanctions problem. One of the main reasons Venezuela launched the Petro was to bypass United States sanctions. But almost immediately, the United States government banned American citizens and businesses from buying, selling, or holding Petros. That cut off a huge potential market and made it impossible for the Petro to gain global traction. In the end, it became a digital token that no one outside of Venezuela could legally touch. Finally, the trust problem. At its core, a currency is only as valuable as the trust people put in it. And the Venezuelan government wasn't exactly known for transparency, stability, or financial discipline. For years, they had printed money to cover their debts, devalued their own currency, and destroyed the economy through mismanagement and corruption. If you can't trust the people behind a currency, you're not going to use it, digital or not. In the end, the Petro became a symbol of a desperate government trying to save a collapsing economy with a digital band-aid. It was a failed experiment. A white paper dream that never had a real chance. And as we'll see next, the fallout from this failed digital gamble had real consequences for the Venezuelan people. That fallout from the Petro's collapse was massive. Notably, the impact on the Venezuelan economy was huge. The Petro was supposed to be a lifeline, a way to restore economic stability and rebuild trust in the financial system. But instead, it became a symbol of government overreach and economic desperation. The bolivar continued to hyperinflate. People lost faith in the government's ability to manage the economy, and the country's economic crisis only worsened. In fact, the Petro may have made things worse by draining what little faith remained in the financial system. Instead of bringing stability, it became just another broken promise in a long line of broken promises. Beyond Venezuela, the impact on the global perception of digital money was tarnished. The Petro was one of the first serious attempts by a national government to create a state-backed digital currency, and its failure set a terrible precedent. It reinforced the idea that all digital currencies are risky, opaque, and prone to insider abuse. It scared off investors, businesses, and even other governments that might have considered launching their own digital coins. It was a black eye for the entire crypto industry. The geopolitical fallout also harmed the country beyond repair. The Petro became a symbol of economic resistance, but it also became a target for sanctions, criticism, and international skepticism. It hardened the divide between Venezuela and the United States, isolated the country even further, and damaged its relationships with key trading partners. In the end, it backfired, drawing more attention to Venezuela's economic crisis and making it harder for the country to recover. Finally, the lesson for the rest of the world. The Petro showed that digital money isn't just about tech. It's about trust, transparency, and credibility. You can't just declare a digital coin into existence. You have to earn people's trust. You have to prove that it has value. And if you don't, you end up with a digital ghost that no one wants to hold. So what can we learn from the Petro's collapse? What does this failed digital experiment tell us about the future of money? And what lessons should other governments take from this bold but flawed attempt to reinvent their financial systems? The obvious one, of course, is the importance of trust. The Petro failed because it was never trusted. It was a digital coin created by a government with a terrible track record on transparency, corruption, and financial stability. No matter how innovative the tech might have been, it was built on a foundation of distrust. And in the world of digital money, trust is everything. If people don't believe in your coin, they won't use it. It's that simple. It also highlights the danger of centralization. The Petro was supposed to be a decentralized digital asset, but in reality it was highly centralized. The government controlled the nodes, the supply, and the rules. It had all the downsides of a fiat currency without the trustless benefits of Bitcoin or Ethereum. It tried to wear the mask of a cryptocurrency without actually being one, and people saw through it. There was also the risk of overpromising. The Petro was marketed as a cure-all for Venezuela's economic problems. It was supposed to solve hyperinflation, bypass sanctions, and restore economic stability. But those promises were never realistic, and when the coin failed to deliver, it only deepened the crisis. But maybe the biggest lesson of all is this. Money is complicated. It's not just code. It's not just math. It's about trust, politics, power, and people. And you can't just declare a new form of money into existence. You have to earn it. You have to prove it. You have to build it. And as we'll see in our next episode, the Petro wasn't the only digital currency to learn this lesson the hard way. Because long before Bitcoin, long before the Petro, there was another bold, retro-futuristic experiment in digital money. A digital gold that almost became the world's first mainstream cryptocurrency until it ran into a wall of US law enforcement. In our next chapter, we'll explore the rise and fall of e-gold, the digital currency backed by physical gold that almost changed the world and paid a high price for it. If you enjoyed this episode, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Would you have trusted the Petro if it had been better designed? Or was it always a bad idea? You've been watching The Crypto Historian, where the past is encrypted and the truth is worth mining.